You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hello and welcome to the Psychedelic and Cannabis Educational News broadcast for today. We are at July 6th already. Oh my goodness, 2023. And we are live here at the Legacy420.com news desk with the on the Pace Networks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast locations now, of course, on cbgtv.com. So we're kind of like everywhere. Good morning, Glenn. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button today. Oh my goodness. My brain is on everything else. Yeah, I am so sorry. I'm hitting the wrong buttons, but I'm going to work on not doing it. I'm going to try again. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Cindy. How are you?
Having a day.
Well, it's funny.
I'm less than a week from leaving for BC to pick up that van and drive it home. So my brain is everywhere, obviously, and I do apologize for that.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be an epic trip.
Yeah. Almost as epic as your garage.
little different epic on different scales there.
Well, yeah, but your garage is still like, that's pretty cool. Anybody that does any home working or like wood shop working or crafting would be totally in love with Glenn's garage 100%.
I just do woodworking. I'm not good at much else.
Well, you have a great garage to do that in. I've got a hair in my face. So we have 8 interesting stories coming to you this morning, 4 before and 4 after the break. So we might as well get to them, hey?
Sure.
The first story that we have for you this morning is a sad one for the cannabis community. The Canadian who opened the store selling tested hard drugs dies of an overdose. And of course, I'm speaking of Jerry Martin. There he is. There's that beautiful smile. He was deemed the king of compassion for many reasons. And sadly, our community has lost an amazing warrior.
The man behind a guerrilla harm reduction initiative in Vancouver has died, and his family is grieving the unexpected loss. The BC Coroner Service confirmed Monday it is investigating the circumstances surrounding Jerry Martin's death.
As we are very early in the process of trying to determine all the facts, I have no additional information available at this time, Ryan Panton with the Coroner Service told Daily Hive. Martin gained national attention when he opened the drugs store. He actually gained national attention years and years and years before when he was helping people with cannabis. In downtown Vancouver, a mobile shop selling MDMA, cocaine, and opiates tested to be free of contaminants such as fentanyl.
Martin was arrested on the illicit dispensary's opening day. The store on wheels was confiscated along with cash and Martin's body armor. Martin's brother confirmed on social media that he died of a drug overdose, and traces of fentanyl were found in his system.
I love my brother so much, Thomas Martin wrote on Facebook. He was a great man, an awesome brother, and it was a total shock to me. Martin has been planning to launch a legal challenge following his arrest, arguing that people need access to safe drugs under Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which entitles people to life, liberty, and the security of person.
He was on a mission to reduce the number of drug overdoses after losing his brother to an overdose in 2022. Launching the drugstore was just the first step in his quest to bring a real safe supply to Canadians.
Rest in peace, Jerry. You have done a lot of work. You were a warrior in the cannabis industry, in the psychedelic industry, and trying to clean the streets of fentanyl. While the government might not have seen it as something noble to do, there are a lot of people that see it as something noble to do. With the many times
find it a little like. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You find it.
I find it a little ironic that they're saying they found fentanyl in his system when his store was testing for fentanyl and it was shut down.
Yes, but you know, in another part of the story, they admit that they took everything from him.
Yes,
everything.
That's what I mean. They couldn't test
his money, he lost everything. He had him and his dogs and his girlfriend.
He lost his life.
Yeah, so he had to go get, you know, his supply at the same place everybody else was. And being in Vancouver as many times, like, you know, in the past, as many times as I've had, it's, you know, it's scary. When there's a bad batch of drugs, you hear nothing but sirens for days and days, because it just hits everybody. And it would have been way too easy. I mean, like, you know, if he was going through a withdrawal and he went to get something just to stop that, you know, there's a good chance if he got it on the streets of Vancouver, it was going to be full of fentanyl or carfentanil. And we will miss you, Jerry. Rest in
trying
peace.
to stop that for other people.
Yeah, and thank you for all the work that you've done. There are people that are going to stand up and move forward, and your constitutional challenge, hopefully somebody will pick up that ball and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a hard story. Moving on, we are heading to MJ Biz Daily. Internal documents raise questions about Canada's Cannabis Act review.
Hundreds of emails, documents, and reports obtained by MJ Biz Daily records request paint a currently underway, a re-examination that could have far-reaching implications for operators in the country's $5 to $6 billion Canadian, which is about 4.3 billion US, legal cannabis industry. The 1,700-page package of documents reveals fresh details about the government-appointed expert panel undertaking the review. In particular, the group's tardiness in launching the scope of the topics covered, as well as what's not covered, and the panel's level of independence from federal officials.
Canada's landmark 2018 Cannabis Act legalizing recreational cannabis requires the federal health minister to initiate a review of the adult use legalization law 3 years after its passage and implementation, meaning the review ought to have kicked off in late 2021. But the review was ultimately launched nearly a year later, September 22nd, 2022, with only one identified member, the chair, Morris Rosenberg, a former deputy minister under 2 federal governments.
The trove of documents indicates the government's cannabis review was broadened on behalf of the minister's office, or the behest of the minister's office, in the immediate days after the panel was launched. Though the documents don't reveal whether it was health ministers Jean-Yves Duclos or Carolyn Bennett who made the request. Other insights from the document obtained by MJ Biz Daily's Access to Information and Privacy Act request include
an internal draft of the terms of reference. Essentially, the review scope and limitations contains significantly more detail than the scope and limitations that have been issued publicly. Other federal departments and agencies may undertake parallel, separate reviews beyond the one stipulated by the Cannabis Act.
And compensation for the panel's chair, almost 200,000 Canadian dollars, and the expected workload. Instructions for the panel to create an Indigenous engagement plan to foster Indigenous participation in the review, as well as a stipulation that the review be conducted in a manner that advances core principles outlined in UNDRIP, referring to the United Nations Declarations on the Right of Indigenous Peoples. A lengthy, non-binding human rights instrument that details the rights of Indigenous peoples around the world, including in Canada.
A requirement for the Cannabis Act Legislative Review Secretariat, the office housed at Health Canada, responsible for the panel's administrative affairs, to keep the panel informed of the findings and recommendations by the Federal Cannabis Strategy Table, which is a separate business-focused body. During the second phase of the panel's review, it will work with provinces and territories to identify priority areas for action that might have implications for the respective jurisdictions under the Cannabis Act.
And cannabis industry officials are particularly interested in the panel's scope of work and its key areas of focus, which are laid out in the terms of reference. Those specific areas, such as the economic, social, and environmental impacts of the Cannabis Act, could lead to reform down the road and has major ramifications for the regulated industry.
In particular, a large number of insolvent cannabis companies have cited the 2018 law's restrictions in their Companies Creditors Arrangements Act, the CCAA filings. The latest being the insolvent retailer Fire and Flower Holdings. Ram Dalla, founder of Ottawa-based medical cannabis business Hybrid Farm, said knowing what the review process will consider is critical for the longevity of many industry operators. As a business owner in highly regulated industry, it is vital for short-term and long-term strategy to know the focal points the review will consider. That's okay. You let me know when you catch up, Dalla said. Dalla noted, we're almost to why so late. Dalla noted Canada's cannabis industry directly and indirectly sustained approximately 90%.
I don't know if I'm on air or not. I'm very sorry.
You are. You are on air. Dalla noted Canada's cannabis industry directly and indirectly sustained approximately 98,000 jobs annually and contributed more than 43 billion Canadian to the country's gross domestic product, citing a report from accounting from Deloitte.
The review is critical to the success of the industry, he said. Consumers and businesses and industry professionals have given feedback expecting critical changes to be made with little to no communication. Being late on a critical review process is frankly insulting, Dalla added, referring to the panel's tardy start. Why so late?
Well, the documents obtained by MJ Bizdaily do not explain the nearly year-long delay on the review's launch. However, in a detailed answer to MJ Bizdaily's question about why the review was launched so late, a Health Canada spokesperson said the Cannabis Act requires the review start 3 years after the law comes into force, but does not mandate the start date to be on the 3-year anniversary. Government speak.
Of course. The spokesperson also said the chair was appointed first as the vetting process continued for the rest of the panel's members. This allowed time for the chair, working with the secretariat, to support the orientation for the expert panel and plan for future engagements, prior to the other panelists commencing in their roles as the vetting process continued.
The 1,700-page package details Health Canada's original plan for a review that was narrower in scope than the one ultimately launched, including pledges not to scrutinize important areas of federal jurisdiction. For instance, a document dated fall 2022 notes that the pardons for cannabis convictions would not be part of the review, instead would be referred to federal departments for consideration.
Of course. After the Canadian government estimated that more than 10,000 people would be eligible for the pardons, known as record suspensions, fewer than 1,000 have been granted. Only 148 were ordered in 2022-2023 fiscal year, according to the Parole Board of Canada. It also appears there were issues tied to the choice of the panel's final member.
Wow. Wow. This is quite a long story. As you can see, I am scrolling down. I unfortunately can't say we have enough time to get through all of it. I find this very interesting so far. If you do have time, you should go finish perusing it for sure. You know, because it's, from what I can see, there's a lot of government speak saying, we're going to do it in 3 years, and then well, we just said, like, it's open to do in 3 years. We didn't say we had to start it.
Yeah.
It just makes you roll your eyes. It's just kind of like, oh my dear Lord. And meanwhile, what they're trying to do, of course, is get rid of the medical side of things, which is wrong. I mean, I think it's so wrong. I mean, like, I'm going to re-sign up with an LP instead of just going with my form, right? Because then just my form is just, I carry it around with me and I go, hey, cop, see, I'm legal. To carry, like all of this, I can carry more than an ounce. So, I highly recommend that anybody that uses it for medical purposes, go back and get your prescription through a licensed producer. You don't have to buy that way, but if you have it through the licensed producer, you're logged. So I'm going to do that just to make sure that the numbers go up and they know that we're still out here needing our medicine and we should have it at better prices. But yes. I'm going to stop babbling about that now because I just said that I had to move on due to time. So Cindy, on to the next story. We're heading over to Marijuana Moment. We are taking a look at the NBA officially signs a contract removing cannabis from banned substance list and allowing players to invest in cannabis companies. Woo.
I hope they're allowed to consume it too. The National Basketball Association, the NBA, and its players' union have officially signed a collective bargaining agreement that removes cannabis from the league's banned substances, lists and lays out rules allowing players to invest in and promote cannabis brands with certain exceptions. About 2 months after the NBA and National Basketball Players Association, NBPA, reached an agreement on a 7-year contract. It is now being signed and enters into force this weekend. The 676-page document contains a number of cannabis provisions, though arguably the most impactful is the removal of cannabis from the list of prohibited substances for players. Smart.
Players will also be allowed to hold a direct or indirect ownership interest, whether controlling or non-controlling, in an entity that produces or sells CBD products, which is defined as cannabis containing up to 0.3% THC by dry weight, consistent with the federal definition of legal hemp. They can also invest in cannabis companies as long as the investment is passive and the player's ownership is less than 50% of the business.
I wonder why it has to be passive. They're not allowed to promote it at all. They're not allowed to work in it. That makes no sense to me. It's either acceptable or it's not. You can't go halfway. Another section of the collective bargaining agreement says that players may participate in the promotion or endorsement of any brand, product, or service of an entity that produces or sells CBD products, as long as the entity isn't a cannabis company. However, a player may request permission from the NBA and the Players Association to promote or endorse any CBD products that are produced or sold by a cannabis company.
Such requests must be in writing, including a complete list of products that the cannabis company produces or sells, a complete list of ingredients of such products, a description of the player's proposed promotion or endorsement activity for the cannabis company's CBD products, a detailed summary of the non-financial terms of any proposed promotion or endorsement agreement between the player and the cannabis company, unless the player's request has been approved in writing by the NBA and the Players Association. The player may not promote or endorse any CBD products that are produced or sold by a cannabis company. Requests for promotion will be denied if the CBD products associated with a cannabis company, a cannabis business, are marketed or sold under a brand that also includes or refers to cannabis products. So they can be owned by the same company, but they have to be called something different. Or the promotion would create a reasonable risk of public confusion with any cannabis product. And I mean, you know, this is a first step, and they have to take a look at federal laws. So they are taking the step that they can take with the federal laws that are in place.
Yes.
They're asking for a lot of information, but they do that with, like, I mean, if they want to go promote Coca-Cola, they have to do all the same stuff. So
it just drives me nuts that they do all halfway measures. It's always halfway, you know.
Well, I mean, and I get that. And if this was based in Canada, I would be in complete agreement with you. But they're doing what they can under the federal laws, and they have to follow the federal laws. So they're pushing just enough, I think, you know. And once the federal laws change, they will legally be able to allow THC cannabis.
Yeah. I don't know. I hear what you're saying. It just makes me mad that they do such little steps.
Oh, and I realize, but if you're going to be mad at the United States federal government. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I mean, honestly, if I owned it, I wouldn't be risking it for cannabis either, and I'm a large cannabis activist.
Yeah. The signed agreement further lays out penalties for players who are convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance, and for those who have engaged in a felony involving the distribution of cannabis. It generally puts cannabis use by players on par with that of alcohol, saying that if an NBA team has reasonable cause to believe that the player was under the influence of cannabis, and/or alcohol while engaged in activities for such teams or for the NBA, or that the player has a dependency or other related issue involving the use of cannabis and/or alcohol, the team may refer the player to the medical director for mandatory evaluation.
Well, that's interesting because it doesn't say they can't use it. They just can't use it when they're working.
Yeah, and I don't know how they're going to tell if they are or not. Are they going to do blood tests? Or I don't. How are they
Well, I
going to
mean,
tell if they're
it would be the same as everything else. If you walk in reeking of alcohol, they're gonna know. If you walk in reeking of cannabis, they're gonna question you. I mean, so
But
I would imagine it is, you know, those kinds of things, right?
yeah, it's. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that one.
Hmm. And again, this is a one that we could like, you know, converse about forever because we are both
Yeah.
activists and we both, I mean, I'm with you in the fact that, I mean, I wish that they would just take the leap because that would go further in pushing their federal government. But I'm glad that they've taken the leap that they have, because basically what they've done is they've opened the door now for THC, you know, and they're not telling their players to not use it. Just don't use it when you're coming to an interview. Don't use it when you're going to come to work, you know?
It's definitely a start, and I do agree with you that way. You know, we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't think it should ever been on that list because it's not a performance enhancing drug. It's
No, but then we have to go back 100 years and change the laws back then, and we can't
Yeah.
do that. So we have to look at today and moving forward, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's a sin that it was on the list, but like I said, you know, we can't go back. Well, 97 years now. No, 100 years this year. 100 years this year. Just passed
Wow.
100 years in April. April 23rd, 2023 marked 100 years of it being illegal. That's insane.
That's crazy.
You know, now it's now legal again, but yeah, 100 years since they criminalized it and put it on all of these lists and made it bad. But you know, it's going to take us a while, but we're slowly getting it removed.
Slowly. I actually never thought in my lifetime that it would be legal in Canada. I really didn't when I was younger.
Yeah, no, and here we are now, and you know, we might even be able to see medical patients, you know, be able to get it for free or at least tax free, in our lifetime, which will be absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. We've got another long story coming to you from Politico. Pardon me. New York's New York's cannabis pioneers detail their struggles. It's got to be hard.
New York's fledgling cannabis entrepreneurs initially felt like they'd won the golden ticket, securing the right to open up the first legal recreational shops in what is expected to be one of the world's biggest cannabis markets. The opportunity seemed all more extraordinary because of how New York had opted to award dispensary licenses. Entrepreneurs who have past cannabis convictions or an immediate family member with a past conviction get first dibs on the coveted slots. The goal is to ensure that people harmed by cannabis enforcement are able to reap the financial benefits of legalization.
But the rollout of New York's adult use market has been a mess. Fewer than 20 licensed shops have opened in the 2+ years since cannabis possession was legalized, while at the same time, thousands of illicit retailers are flourishing all over the state. That's left New York's chosen group of entrepreneurs increasingly frustrated as they try to navigate a program that they say made big promises but has so far largely failed to deliver. Tensions boiled over during a meeting last month between licensees and the state's top cannabis regulators.
Licensees argued that the program pits them against the state in finding locations for cannabis shops, forces them into unfavorable deals with the state's hand-picked contractors, and requires them to agree to leases that reference financing agreements without even seeing the loan terms. At the same meeting, regulators promised changes to the program, including changing the way locations are approved and providing additional low-interest loans to licensees. That's nice.
Here's a closer look at some of the justice-impacted applicants who are struggling to get their doors open. Caitlin German qualified to open a legal cannabis dispensary because of an earlier pot conviction that cost her her law license. German, 43, was a lawyer for 10 years before getting disbarred after a felony cannabis conviction. Oh, what a sin.
Wow. Like other dispensary applicants, German relied on promises from the state that there would be low-interest loans and turnkey dispensaries for licensees. The Dormitory Authority of the state of New York appointed an investment team last June to oversee the public-private fund designed to support the first group of dispensary licensees. The state appropriated $50 million and said Friday that it had finally raised the rest of the $150 million it had planned to raise by last September. Meanwhile, Reuben McDaniel, the president of DAISY, stepped down from the Cannabis Control Board after the conscientious meeting with licensees.
Without a location from the state, German and her 3 business partners struck out on their own and ended up finding a location with help from the municipality of Rensselaer outside of Albany. Because they found their own location, however, they initially couldn't avail themselves to the $200 million public-private fund, of course. Instead, German ended up taking out a personal loan to finance her dispensary build-out. While German expects the renovations to cost less than $100,000, she doesn't think that sum is enough for most licensees.
I wouldn't have applied if I knew I had to incur personal debt in order to do this, she said in an interview. But regulators recently said they would allow entrepreneurs who found their own locations to apply for 100,000 low-interest loans, meaning that Germain and her team may be eligible for that funding.
It remains unclear, however, how many of the loans would be available and what the application process would look like. A spokesperson for the Office of Cannabis Management did not respond to a question about how many of the loans would be available to licensees. We're running out of time for this story, sadly. I want to scroll down and we'll just show you the faces of the people who are having trouble because of the way New York is rolling it out. Keith Delasio, and the little thing under Keith's thing says he was pressured to open a short-term pop-up store instead of a permanent location. He refused because he said it made no business sense. If we go down, we've got Osbort, and he was waiting for a location from the state, and the team behind the cannabis place decided to find their own location. Carson Grant. There are so many, like others who received a dispensary license. Carson Grant was promised a turnkey location paid for by the public-private fund through the low-interest loan, but he has not yet been able to open up shop, describing the past 7 months as extremely painful. And there's write-ups on what each of them have gone through. And it's sad. These are people that were hurt by cannabis laws and have lost their life. As we read the first one, she was a lawyer.
Yeah. Imagine being disbarred for cannabis. Imagine that.
Her whole life gone.
They take your livelihood away because of cannabis.
Sad. It's
Justice,
sad.
Right?
It's sad. Those were 4 really great stories. Please go back and read the 3 that, they were very long and we just didn't have time to get to them before the break. But that does mean that it is break time, which means it is medication time for Glenn and I. And we're going to go have a joint session. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Boxcast, LinkedIn, Roku TV, and at paceradio.net and cbgtv.com. We'll be right back in just over 4 minutes.
Is 420 camping your thing? Do you like cannabis cups? Want to learn more about cannabis? Enjoy music festivals? Living on the East Coast or looking for a really good reason to visit? Then Harvest Fest is calling your name.
Join us the weekend of July 14th to 16th at Fox Mountain Camping Park in the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, to meet like-minded people, have your cannabis questions answered, listen to great bands, and have a blast.
Service lots available and camping is included in festival admission. $60 for the weekend, or $30 for Friday, and $40 for Saturday. Food trucks, hot showers, flush toilets, and accessible washrooms. Rolling contest sponsored by Canadian Lumber Limited, with chances to win a case of rolling papers and more throughout the weekend.
For info about attending or vending, email chair@mumm.ca. Hope to see you there.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBG TV, broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Did you know that the PACE Radio Network isn't just a radio network? That's right, because most, but not all of our programming is now done via video and is then podcasted at paceradio.net. So if you want to watch our programming, you'll find us on the PACE Radio Network's Facebook page, plus the show's own page, and you'll find us live on the network's YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can find it all, video and audio, at paceradio.net.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyndonega.
We have two lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with. And then we also have a line under the Red E brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Welcome back from our medication session. You're live with Pace Radio. Listen to me. Well, we are on Pace Radio, but with Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. And I just realized that in the headline I put July 5th, and it's not the 5th, it's the 6th. So when I went to reach and hit the 6th, I must have hit the 5th by mistake. I am so sorry. I just saw that. But we are July 6th, just so y'all know. And we are back from our medication session. How you doing, Glenn?
I'm doing great.
Excellent.
Doing a lot better now.
Medication sessions help with that. That's for sure.
They do.
They do. We're going to head to our first story after the break, coming to us from Marijuana Moment. Bipartisan lawmakers applaud the FDA for publishing psychedelics research guidance as they requested in new Congress bill.
Bipartisan congressional lawmakers are applauding the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, for releasing the first ever draft guidance on psychedelic research, a development that they had requested through a new bill just days before the agency took the step. Representative Dan Crenshaw, who's a Republican from Texas, Mariannette Miller Meeks, who's a Republican from IA, I'm not sure that short form, and Ro Khanna, who's a Democrat from California, filed the legislation this month. And while the FDA didn't say that its decision to release the guidance was directly responsive to the measure, it's precisely the action the first part of the bill addressed.
I'm glad the FDA is taking the first step of issuing guidance for psychedelic clinical trials and listening to my bipartisan legislation with Representatives Miller, Meeks, and Khanna, Crenshaw said in the press release on Thursday. It's critical we get this right for the researchers doing the important scientific work. We need this guidance to expand clinical trial access so that we can push forward life-saving psychedelic therapies for our veterans, service members, and people living with PTSD and CPTSD, traumatic brain injury, and substance abuse disorder. The congressman, a military veteran who has taken a leadership role on advancing psychedelics research, said.
FDA's draft guidance provides scientists with a framework to carry out research that could lead to the development of psychedelic medicines. A 60-day public comment period is open for interested parties to submit feedback on the final guidance should be shaped. Many veterans find guided use of psychedelics with assisted therapy as a way to successfully treat the excruciating post-traumatic traumatic pain they face, which with better outcomes and less medication side effects in pilot studies, Miller Meeks said. As a physician, I know the importance of medical research, and I am encouraged by the FDA's support and guidance regarding psychedelic clinical trials. This important step gives our veterans another option and hope when they feel they've run out of methods to cope.
Interest in psychedelics has grown exponentially over recent years as cities and states across the country have moved to promote research, remove criminal penalties, and regulate access to substances such as psilocybin and MDMA, both of which have already been designated by FDA as breakthrough therapies. The agency's draft guidance describes basic considerations throughout the drug development process, including trial conduct, data collection, subject safety, and new drug application requirements, FDA said.
Khanna, for his part, said that the agency's guidance is a critical step to help protect the well-being of veterans and those living with PTSD. I'm proud to co-sponsor this bill to expand the body of research on psychedelic therapies in the hopes of improving the health of many Americans, he said.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good news story.
Yeah, the Lawmakers bipartisan bill called on the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, acting through the FDA Commissioner, to issue for public comment draft guidance and considerations for conducting clinical trials for psychedelic-assisted therapy, including how those seeking an investigational use exemption for such clinical trials should request interactive support by the FDA. If enacted, it would have required FDA to produce the draft guidance within 180 days, but the agency was evidently prepared to release it much sooner. The bill would also mandate the FDA to finalize its guidance $180 after the draft document's publication, so lawmakers may still be interested in advancing the measures with that provision.
There are open questions related to psychedelics-assisted therapy that need answers. Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions said, which is VETS. Unfortunately, researching these compounds can be difficult due to administrative requirements related to scheduling status. We welcome efforts that reduce barriers to research and help pave the way for access to these life-saving therapies. On the same day that the legislation was introduced last week, Crenshaw discussed it at a House Energy and Commerce Committee hearing, where he talked about psychedelics as one possible solution to the country's substance misuse issues.
The congressman said that he was working on getting clinical trial guidance for psychedelic therapies from the FDA, adding that this therapy will be earth-shattering. It already has changed dozens of lives. I think that might be a little misprint. We're not talking about 1960s LSD trips, although they help too. This therapy is supervised by a medical practitioner and often occurs with repeat treatments in controlled settings, he said. And when it comes to the efficacy of this therapy, the proof is in the data, in the testimonies. But we need the FDA to issue clinical trial guidance for psychedelic-assisted therapy so that the industry can actually invest in this.
The FDA's Federal Register filing notes that the public docket has been made available for people to submit comments on the draft guidance. This move is timely as lawmakers and health officials have shown serious interest in quickly expanding research into psychedelics, as studies have revealed that their potential for the treatment of conditions such as severe depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and addiction, and many more.
Yeah, yeah. This does go on a little bit longer, but I mean, we've got the basic gist of it. They're trying to push it through. They're trying to make it happen, and it seems to be politicians on both sides of the fence.
It's nice that it's the FDA taking the lead on this one.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, they're the ones that have to give that final stamp. It has to be approved by the FDA to head out, and for them to do this, like, I mean, I'm hoping that their stamp comes sooner and people can get help legally sooner without fear of repercussions, because that's what really holds people back. It's not that they don't believe in the medicine, it's that they're scared of what the government might or might not do, which sucks. Just sucks. Heading on to the next story, coming to us from Comprehensive Cannabis Consulting. Happy 4th of July, a day to celebrate cannabis legalization.
In honor of July 4th, we would like to share a story to celebrate cannabis legalization and freedom in America. On this day, 242 years ago, our founding mothers and fathers stood up against tyranny and depression, and declared our independence as a sovereign nation. In the days of our forefathers and foremothers, the plant that we now work so hard to legalize was commonplace. Hemp cultivation began in Jamestown, Virginia in 1616, and its fiber was used to make clothing, sails, and rope. Many American landowners were jailed if they refused to grow hemp, as an American society knew how important this crop was for their livelihood. Many of our country's presidents grew the crop, as well as including George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and it goes on. Early drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on hemp paper. Prior to the Civil War, cannabis was added to the U.S. pharmacopoeia and was sold over the counter in a variety of medicinal preparations. Cannabis was a common part of American life until Prohibition started in 1906 with the introduction of the Pure Food and Drugs Act.
Yeah. Yeah. Today we reflect on the efforts. Corey, go ahead.
Today, we reflect on the efforts of thousands of people who have worked so hard to bring legal medicinal cannabis to the 31 U.S. states and responsible adult use to 8 states and the District of Columbia. Medical cannabis markets across the U.S. now serve over 2 million patients. People with multiple sclerosis, migraines, epilepsy, cancer, fibromyalgia, arthritis, and chronic pain have all benefited in some way from using cannabis. Research is currently underway around the world to discover more medicinal uses for cannabis, though in the U.S. this research is severely limited due to the fact that cannabis is still federally illegal. While these changes are revolutionary, there is still a tremendous amount of work to be done, and the movement for federal marijuana legalization and the cannabis industry needs your help. Look to our Canadian neighbors who legalized cannabis for medicinal use nationally 17 years ago, and this year they legalized cannabis for adult use. With the first legal sales slated for October 2018. So that's an old reference there.
Huh. Yeah. Just last week, our federal government allowed FDA approval of the first cannabis-based drug while still implementing the IRD. Yeah, this is a story back from 2018. Yeah, that's why some references. It is an old story. Just last week, our federal government allowed the FDA to approve the first cannabis-based drug while still implementing the IRC 280 taxation, effectively penalizing state legal operators for providing patients and consumers safe and effective products they desire and deserve. The forms of legal oppression evoke the stories of the individuals that founded this country as they rebelled against taxation without representation.
We used the hemp plant to make the ropes and the very sails that allowed our country's founders to flee oppression. Yet then we criminalized it and oppressed minority communities for decades under prohibition. As we work for legalization of cannabis, we must be sure not to leave our brothers and sisters behind who are still incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis crimes and the fight for social equity laws to repair the harm caused by the war on drugs. More now than ever is the time for us to stand up for what we know to be right. In honor of the rebellious leaders who brought us independence, we must strive for the legalization of cannabis and social equity in all 50 of our great states. See ways you can participate in the cannabis revolution.
Yeah, and they list a whole bunch there. The ship has sailed, and it's only a matter of time before we find safe harbor. All great movements start with a seed, and 3C aims to continue to help guide, grow, and plant the seeds of safe access to medicine, cannabis legalization, and responsible regulation. We must follow the advice of George Washington and make the most of hemp seed and sow it everywhere. Just remember, today isn't a day for beer and barbecues. It's a day to reflect and honor how far we've come as a country, yet how much more we need to do. In the words of Abraham Lincoln, those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves. If we work together and keep pushing legalization, the day will not be far off that we can sit down and share a beer or a joint responsibly in the Independence Day and enjoy this great country. Put it in your pipe and smoke it, Jeff Sessions, or not. Don't prevent others from their own life, liberty, and pursuits of happiness. Let's celebrate cannabis legalization today and enjoy our freedom. Doesn't matter when it's written, it is 100% accurate.
Yep. It's a good little article. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got to talk fast. We have to move on. We get two more stories. The next one's coming to us from Marijuana Moment. California courts sealed 90% of eligible marijuana cases. State Attorney General's report shows.
California courts have sealed, resentenced, or dismissed about 90% of eligible cannabis convictions for activity that was legalized under 2016 voter-approved initiative. A new report from the state's Attorney General's office shows. It was legalized in 2016. It took them till now. As of April 6th, the state's judicial system has processed relief of 206,052 out of an estimated 227,650 cannabis cases that were identified as eligible following the passage of records reform legislation that the governor signed in 2018.
The new report released last month by Attorney General Rob Bonta's office shows that most counties across the state have made significant progress since being given the directive. When voters approved Proposition 64 in 2016, it legalized cannabis possession, cultivation, and sales, while providing an option for people with prior cannabis convictions to petition the courts for relief. 2 years later, Governor Gavin Newsom signed AB 1793, which created a process to automate clemency.
Then the governor signed separate legislation, AB 1706, last year that built upon the state's new record sealing law by giving courts until March 1st, 2023 to seal records for qualifying cannabis cases that weren't challenged by July 1st, 2020. The bill, which was sponsored by the Attorney General's wife, who serves in the state assembly, also required the California Department of Justice to work with the Judicial Council of California to produce quarterly joint progress reports to the legislature. This is the second report to that end. The first report showed that as of January 2023, courts had either resentenced or dismissed 197,205 cannabis cases.
Some countries aren't making much progress, notably Alameda, Amador, Marin, and Trinity. California Normal said in a blog post on Wednesday. Marked progress was seen in El Dorado, Humboldt, Kern, Moderna, Napa, Riverside, Sacramento, and Sutter counties, with small gains in other counties. Imperial County brings up the rear with only 7.9% compliance, clearing only 258 of its potential 1,767 convictions. Prior to the enactment of AB 1706, the Attorney General in 2021 urged prosecuting attorneys throughout the state to expedite their overdue processing of past cannabis convictions in order to allow eligible individuals to have their sentences reduced or removed and past records sealed from public view. And meanwhile.
Meanwhile, a poll published last week found that Californians' support for legalizing cannabis is now even higher than when they approved the reform. At the bailout of 2016, and a solid majority of voters also want cannabis retailers to be operating in their own neighborhoods. Separately, a California Assembly Committee recently approved a Senate-passed bill to legalize cannabis cafes, allowing dispensaries to offer non-cannabis food and drinks at their location if they received local approval. The measure is largely consistent with a separate proposal to authorize cannabis cafes that passed on the Assembly floor earlier this session.
Also, state cannabis regulators announced last month that they have awarded $4.1 million to cities and counties across the state to support local cannabis business licensing programs working to address unmet consumer demand and help curb illicit market. The California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, the GOBIZ, separately announced in May that the state has awarded more than $50 million in cannabis tax-funded community reinvestment grants.
DCC has also recently awarded nearly $20 million in research grants funded by cannabis tax revenue to 16 academic institutions to carry out all studies into cannabis, including novel cannabinoids like Delta-8 THC and the genetics of legacy strains from the state. California is additionally making moves to expand its cannabis market beyond the state's borders, with regulators seeking a formal opinion from the state's Attorney General's office on whether to allow interstate cannabis commerce would put the state at significant risk of federal enforcement action.
The request for guidance from the DCC is a key step that could eventually trigger a law that the governor signed last year, empowering him to enter into agreements with other legal states to import and export cannabis products. Separately last week, an Assembly committee approved a Senate-passed bill to legalize possession and facilitated use of certain psychedelics, which is really cool.
Progress.
Every little step forward is still a step forward. I wish they would be bigger steps, but I will take what they're giving because, it'll eventually all add up to be a great big step, and we'll be there someday. Fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
On to our last story, coming to us from CTV News. Australia is the first nation to let patients with depression or PTSD be prescribed psychedelics.
Sydney, Australia is now the first, Australia is the first country to allow psychiatrists to prescribe certain psychedelic substances to patients with depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. Beginning Saturday, Australian physicians can prescribe doses of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or for PTSD, psilocybin, the psychoactive ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, can be given to people who have hard-to-treat depression. The country put the two drugs on the list of approved medicines by the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
Scientists in Australia were surprised by the move, which was announced in February but took effect July 1st. One scientist said it puts Australian at the forefront of research in this field. Absolutely. Chris Lagmead, Deputy Director of the Neuromedics Discovery Center in the Monash Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, said there have been very few advancements on treatment of persistent mental health issues in the last 50 years.
The growing cultural acceptance has led 2 U.S. states to approve measures for their use. Oregon was the first to legalize the adult use of psilocybin, and Colorado's voters decriminalized psilocybin in 2022. Days ago, President Joe Biden's youngest brother said in a radio interview that the president has been very open-minded in conversations the two have had about the benefits of psychedelics as a form of medicinal treatment. Or medical treatment. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration designated psilocybin as a breakthrough therapy in 2018, a label that's designed to speed the development and review of drugs to treat a serious condition. Psychedelics research have benefited from federal grants, including Johns Hopkins, and the FDA released draft guidance late last month for researchers designing clinical trials testing psychedelic drugs as potential treatments for a variety of medical conditions.
Still, the American Psychiatric Association has not endorsed the use of psychedelics in treatment, noting the FDA has yet to offer final determination. And medical experts in the U.S. and elsewhere, Australia included, have cautioned that more research is needed on the drug's efficacy and the extent of the risks of psychedelics, which can cause hallucinations.
There are concerns that evidence remains inadequate and moving to clinical service is premature, that incompetent or poorly equipped clinicians could flood the space. That treatment will be unaffordable to most. That formal oversight of training, treatment, and patient outcomes will be minimal or ill-informed, said Dr. Paul Lachinski, Key, head of Monash University's clinical psychedelic lab. Plus, the drugs will be expensive in Australia, about 10,000, roughly $6,600 per patient for the treatment. Wow.
Oh, shit. Melansky, I think that's how we're saying it, said the opportunity for Australians to access the drugs for specific conditions is unique. There's excitement about the drug policy process, he said, and the prospect of being able to offer patients more suitable and tailored treatment without the constraints imposed by clinical trials and rigid protocols. Wow, that's 6,600. That's about 10,000 here in Canada, like, somewhere between 9 and 10,000 here in Canada. That's a lot of money. Like, I mean, most people that I know that go to get a, they're talking MDMA and psilocybin. So a trip guide for a trip center for that, like, I mean, is anywhere between $500 to $1,000 on average.
Is that a one-day treatment?
Yeah.
Okay.
But also with integration and phone calls afterwards, right? Like everything that goes with it. But that's your 8-hour, your 8-hour session and meals and looked after and follow-up phone calls.
So how long do you think that your advisor would spend with you? Like, I mean, from beginning to end, are you talking like a 5-minute phone call to arrange it and then 8 hours there?
Oh, gosh, no. A 5-minute phone call to talk about it. Okay, let's come in for an interview and sit down and see if this is right for you. Let's go over your history. Let's have a chat. What are you doing? How are you feeling? We have to go over not just your medical history, but your mental health history. Is this, is one or both of these treatments suitable for you? And then you have to, teach them how to prepare for it. Then you have to, you bring them in. So they're in there for an hour or so before the session starts. You make sure they're comfortable. You go through the session. Like I say, there's food, there's babysitting. You have to follow them around. You have to look after them. And then there's a couple hours after they come back where you're helping them eat a nice light meal. You're sending them on your way. You're awake for 24 hours waiting for their phone call after that, just in case, you know what I mean? So you're on call, the phone is on. And then after that, like, I mean, you're going to give any number of sessions for integration afterwards. And each session is going to be at least an hour long.
Okay.
So that's what you get for $500 to $1,000. And that's a pretty good deal. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're talking basically the same thing, 6-7 times the amount.
Yeah, but they're also going to, instead of having 1 or 2 trip setters that are there to be your trip setter, they're talking about taking the psychiatrist and teaching them how to be a trip setter. So now your $500 day has turned into a $5,000 day. And that's the big difference. Like, I mean, your psychiatrist can still be there to treat you afterwards, but your trip setter doesn't have to have a PhD in psychiatry.
Makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been going that way in our medical system for a long time. I mean, we allow midwives now. We allow prescriptions directly at the counter, which was unheard of 20 years ago.
So we'll get there eventually. I mean, right now we're training therapists and psychiatrists and psychologists here in Canada. That's the wrong move. What you should be implementing, I think, is somebody like me or you who's trained in trip setting, who has compassion and empathy to sit there. But, to qualify to go in on Tuesday to have your trip, you have to have a Wednesday appointment with your talk therapist.
Yep.
You're working together hand in hand. By the time you get there on Wednesday, I've sent the file on how Tuesday went. Do you know what I mean? And the psychiatrist can then go over that with you and start your integration.
It makes more sense to me. It seems to me you're asking for a nurse instead of a doctor. You know what I mean? That kind of analogy.
Yep.
It makes more sense to me that way.
Yeah.
And the nurse can spend a lot more time learning about this.
Yes.
Than the doctor ever would.
Yes. And that takes us to the end of our show. I got to kind of rush through this. We are a couple of minutes late today, but that's okay. It's my last day for a month. For our friends here at legacy420.com and Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, and Lime Life Hydroponics. That is our show for today, July 6th, not 5th. 2023. Catch our next show on Monday. I think it's Reverend Kelly and Al. You're not in yet for Rev Kelly. That's
Yep.
while I'm gone, right? Yeah. So Rev Kelly and Alan on Monday. You didn't get to see them this past Monday. So with that, have a great weekend. I will see you next week before I go, and I will see you in a month, Glenn. Have a great weekend, all. Bye.
Peace.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.